And so we have seen him. A great journey of many miles is before us, but it is not the same road we traveled, and we are not the same as when we set out. Our journey began in the skies. Our wisest ones were ready for the sign, for the great scholar Belteshazzar, Daniel, long ago prophesied the coming of an anointed one. A royal alignment in the skies was now awaited by the wise of both East and West, and it would come in my lifetime. The prophecies began with the birth of a child of God, and ended when his enemy is defeated, and when we shall all be free to be with God himself. The stars told us to expect a prince born under the royal signs of the lion and the sun, and of the house of Judah among the Jews. And so we gathered our wisest friends to journey to seek him out. That journey beggars the telling, but after nigh on 2 years, we turned our weary feet towards their holy city, certain we would find the promised prince in the house of their king. How deluded, and how our own wisdom failed us. This Idumean king is not the one we came to seek. His name, Herod, made a king by the Romans, a cruel and deceitful man. None of his blood could be worthy of a throne. But we sought a true-born prince from the blood of ancient kings. Herod was disturbed by our presence. The whole city was stirred up. But our diversion was not fruitless. The wise men spoke of a promised Messiah. Their prophecies fitted ours exactly. The baby to be born from the line of their King David in Bethlehem in the land of Judah, a prince of light, born of Judah, the lion, just as the sun was being born in the sign of Leo. The God of the Jews speaks to his people through their book, which they say is God-breathed. It is to them as the book of the skies to all other men. Listen. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, and the obedience of the nations is his. And therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin shall be with child, and will give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. Emmanuel, God with us. They believe God himself will come to live with his people, a shepherd of men, yet one whose origins are from old, from ancient times. And it was so promised he would be born in Bethlehem. And now I can attest to that. We left the city, fearing the wrath of the king, but no sooner were we on the road, when we saw again the sign in the sky, and we rejoiced. And the sign came to stop above one house, no palace nor great temple or city, a simple dwelling. Our hearts were open to see the royal child with his mother, and we were moved to worship. We had brought gifts, ones we barely knew the meaning of ourselves. Gold for royalty, frankincense for priestly power, myrrh for life and healing. A wondrous mystery, this Emmanuel, God with us. Our hearts felt it all, and we are changed. We were strangers, Gentiles to him, yet he welcomed us, and we and this world will never be the same again. Jesus, Yeshua, God's salvation, that kingly child was to lay down his life, to deliver not just the Jews, but all mankind. And I remember the day I met God. Matthew 2, verse 9. When they had heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they had come into the house, They saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him: gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, we have the account of what we know as wise men that came searching for a king. They left their home of comfort and travelled in some of the most difficult terrain for over 1,000 miles in search for an infant king, this great Messiah to be born through prophecy and the star that spoke about him. They had seen the great star in the east, and they knew this was the sign that the greatest king ever was to be born. This king was going to be the greatest king that would ever live on earth throughout history. So the Bible uses the term Magi or Magi, and it was originally associated with the Medes and the Persians and has its beginning with a man called Zoroaster. We know that Magi at this time were employed by rulers of countries in much the same way as specialists are employed by modern governments today, to keep them up to date on latest developments and to provide advice. Magi were sometimes used as envoys to travel to other countries, representing the royal family. They would gather for important events like coronations or funerals or the opening of new cities. They were the professors and philosophers of the day. They were brilliant and highly educated scholars who were trained in medicine, history, religion, prophecy and astronomy. They were also trained in what we would call astrology, and so would have been particularly interested in the study of the night sky. It was thought at that time that what was observed in the sky was reflected in the events upon the earth. Monitoring of events in heaven, it was believed, gave insight into what was happening or going to happen upon the earth. Knowledge of the night sky was therefore essential to them. To start with, astrology related to man's search for God. The ancients studied the skies in order to find the answers to the great questions of life. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? These Magi travelled hundreds of miles for up to 2 years. And they came to Jerusalem, to the place they thought this child king would be born. They came to Herod's palace in order to worship him. But Jesus was not to be born in a palace, and they were sent to Bethlehem to find him. We read that when these Magi finally found Jesus, they fell down and they worshipped him. You will not find anywhere in the Bible that they did the same thing for Herod. They only did this to this little babe found in Bethlehem. But when they met him, they recognized that this was the promised child, this was the promised king, and they bowed down and worshipped him. But notice, they didn't just give him honor. They recognized that this was no ordinary person, but was God himself. Just as those wise men, those Magi, sought out Jesus, I want to say that the message today is that wise people still seek Jesus. Wise people still seek Jesus. Let's look at the gifts that these Magi brought these precious gifts. What was the first gift? The first gift was gold. They paid a tribute to Jesus. They signified with this gift that he was a king. We don't know how much gold was given, nor what happened to the gold afterwards. But this was a gift fit for a king. It spoke of riches and power. It was a gift showing that the Magi recognized something of Jesus' royal, regal authority. Gold is the first gift. Frankincense, the second. This is a yellow gum, and it's collected by peeling back the bark of the frankincense tree. The resin gives off a sweet scent when heated or burned. It is obtained from a tree by making incisions in the bark, and the gum flows out from it. It is highly odorous or fragrant when burnt, and was therefore used in worship, where it was burnt as a pleasant offering to God. It is found in the East Indies, but mainly in Arabia. This signified that Jesus was going to be a pleasing sacrifice to God for the sins of the world. So right at his birth, these Magi recognize that this child was going to die for the sins of the world. Frankincense was used in the worship of God in the Jewish temple. It also presents his deity, Emmanuel, God with us, man born in flesh. It was one of the elements used in the Jewish holy anointing oil mentioned in the book of Exodus. Frankincense was one of the most prized and costly substances in the ancient world. It was worth more than its weight in gold. Kings and emperors had to have this. Frankincense was also a gift fit for a priest. The Magi discerned something of Jesus' priesthood and holiness and presented him with the appropriate gift. The frankincense speaks of Jesus as a priest, a bridge builder between God and man. And the Bible, if you to study the Bible in the New Testament, it talks about Jesus being the great high priest. So that's gold and frankincense. The third is myrrh. This was also a production of Arabia and was obtained from a thorny tree which grows to be about 8 or 9 feet and is harvested in the same manner as frankincense. The name denotes bitterness. It was used chiefly in embalming the dead because it had the property of preserving dead bodies. This signifies Jesus' death. Myrrh is a kind of perfume made from the leaves of the cistus rose. Myrrh was another ingredient of the holy anointing oil mentioned in Exodus. After a person died, myrrh was used to anoint the body and to prepare it for burial. In the Gospel of John, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, the fourth book in the New Testament, John chapter 19 verse 39, it tells us that Jesus' body was bound in linen wrapping along with 75 pounds of myrrh and aloes. So the gift of myrrh pictures his suffering and death. Gold points to his majesty, for Jesus is king. Frankincense points to his deity, for he is God. Myrrh points to his humanity, for he was destined to suffer and die. These were all precious gifts that the Magi, expensive gifts, gave to Jesus. But God gave them and us, you and me, far much more than they could ever give to Jesus. God gave his own precious Son for us. God could not give you and I anything more precious in the whole of the universe than his precious Son, Jesus Christ. These wise men saw beyond the present and into the future. They sought him out and they worshipped him. These highly intellectual, educated, wealthy men saw that this child would one day rule the world, and they were not ashamed to fall down on their knees and worship the greatest ever king that would rule the earth. Something happened to these men when they met Jesus. They had an epiphany moment. Epiphany means that there was a sudden realization and meaning of something. It signifies when someone has found the last piece in the puzzle, when they see the whole picture. The Magi, when they saw Jesus, bowed down and worshipped him. What can we learn from them today? If these men can find Jesus, so can we. Think of all the barriers that they had to cross to get to Jesus. A culture barrier, a distance barrier, a language barrier, a racial barrier, a religious barrier, not to speak of a hostile king and indifferent religious leaders. It wasn't easy for them to find Jesus, but they did. As we finish this little talk today, I am praying right now that everyone listening will get an epiphany moment, a revelation, a realization of just who Jesus is, and will follow him and will worship him. Will you receive Jesus into your life today? God's gift for you. Jesus, the reason for the season, the one who left heaven and came to earth for us. Emmanuel, God with us, the central meaning of Christmas. Thank you so much for listening.